Welcome to this week's episode of Resisting the Dragon's Beast. I'm Pastor Michael Zarling with Pastor Peter Hagen. We're talking about Book 2, which is going to be on Revelation 17. On the working title right now is Babylon and the Beast. And then since last week's episode, we reworked the title a little bit of what happens when the government promotes paganism. Since the way I had written the original title, Peter, you didn't really understand what I was getting at. So figure if the co-author didn't get it, our people wouldn't either.
Just want to be clear. Clear.
Yeah, being clear is good. And so we're thankful for all of you who are listening to this. I encourage you to share it. That we had 90 views on YouTube and then 52 downloads of the podcast. So that's good. That's good stuff. And I appreciate those of you who have sent me any podcasts on American Christianity and paganism, because I've received a couple of those. So I'm interested to listen to those as well. So keep on sending those things to us and to Peter as well. All right.
Definitely.
We're going to get into Revelation chapter 17. So if you want to follow along in your Bibles, we'll go through about half of it and then just kind of talk our way through. And then as we're talking through, also applying it. So figured, Peter, I'll read the verse and I'll tell you my information, and then you can give the really wise information afterwards after you've thought about it.
I think my information is, yep.
So John writes in verse 2, the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality with her, and those who make their home on the earth have become drunk on the wine of her immorality. And so what John is talking about is that there is a cooperation between the apostate church, the false church, the pagan church, and the evil governments to persecute Christians. And we see this throughout history where you have these pagan kings or the cultures around Israel. And then as you see in the history of Israel in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Kings, of these pagan kings who are not named David and Solomon and Josiah, that they are leading their people into idolatry. So I don't know if you want to pick it up there, Peter, is what we see in history, and then we can talk about where we see it in our current culture.
Yeah. I think what we really see, especially is beginning here in chapter 17, is that this woman on the beast is the exact counterpart to the woman pictured like back in Revelation 12, pictured as the church, where the church is the bride of Christ. The church is crowned with, the things of heaven, sun, moon, and stars. And here is the prostitute who sits on many waters and just does whatever she wants. And she's going to be cloaked with the things of the earth, gold and precious stones and pearls, that sort of a thing. And in the idea that that correlation between immorality and adultery and idolatry, that those things all kind of go together. That spiritually, idolatry is spiritual adultery, and using such a vivid image of this woman as a prostitute really heightens the reality that God is trying to portray of the alluring nature of these idolatries and of what they promise, and luring them further and further away from the one true bridegroom, who is Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and that's important for everyone to understand. Like you said, Peter, that the prostitute here is the opposite of the bride of Christ. So read Revelation chapter 12, that bride of Christ, the woman, is not Mary, it's the Christian church. And then you see the dragon that is attacking the woman, the bride of Christ, the Christian church, and then he ends up, that the woman is then taken out into the wilderness, and that's going to be important when we read the next verse, the wilderness, and then Satan perverts everything, and the way he does that here is that the beast, that the prostitute who's trying to look alluring, like the bride of Christ, is riding on the beast out of the sea in Revelation chapter 13. And the two are working in tandem. And that's the whole point of this book, is to show that our government in America is working in tandem with these pagan cultures, promoting them, and then even paying for their promotion with our tax money as Christians. And then we'll be talking about, what do we do with it? So we're going to see, Lord willing, as we write this, that say like with Baal, and we see how Jesus overcomes the prophet Baal in the Old Testament, and how Jesus overcomes him, that prophet or that pagan god, in Revelation. And then we'll tie it to a specific person. Like with Baal, I was thinking of Elijah on Mount Carmel, and then how Elijah overcomes the prophets of Baal, and then a call to action for us as Christians. Because in our culture today, and I want you to react to this, Peter, is, and I think it was Andrew Breitbart, he said that politics is downstream of culture. So where our culture goes, there goes our politics. But Michael Knowles, who is a conservative podcaster on the Daily Wire that I listen to, he says, yeah, that's true, but there are times where culture is downstream of politics. So I'll comment on that, but I want you to think about those two things. Is politics downstream of culture, or culture downstream of politics?
That's a good question, and it actually dovetails with something else that I've been reading in a different book, fantastic book. I don't remember the name of it right now, but it's basically asserting the idea that we normally think of the society going downhill, devolving into paganism and all sorts of other very obvious public sins, and that after a society becomes more pagan, then that society, as a result, places less value on family and on children and less respect for marriage. And one of the main things that the author is asserting in this book is that it might actually be the other way around, that deserting, downplaying marriage and neglecting the care of children and seeing children as only a burden instead of a blessing results in a more pagan society. And so that idea of, which comes first, culture or politics, if you think of politics and the laws of the land as like the guardrails or the dam, and the river is going to fill up all that area behind the dam, wherever that dam is. If you build a dam, 20 miles further downstream, and you tear down the dam that was there, then the river is going to fill that whole area. In this scenario, think of the river as culture and the dam as the laws, the politics, the law of the land. Because we're dealing with fallen humans. We're dealing with people who have an inborn sinful flesh and a propensity towards sin whenever and wherever. And in an external way in society, that sin is only restrained by law. There are times when the river overflows the banks or overflows the dam, and there's so much cultural pressure behind it that the dam bursts, and then they have to do something else to stop the devastation. But I would kind of go, I don't know. That's an interesting one. Which comes first? And I think the answer might change when we're talking about different forms of culture. When we have a direct electing of our senators as opposed to a representative electing of our senators, as it was over a century ago, that changes things. Because if somebody only has to say the correct things, then they will pander to whatever gets the most votes. If there is another layer of another representative who gets that person into power, then that senator is that much more removed from popular opinion and talks more about a particular platform instead of pandering to what the culture, the people want.
Yeah, I think the answer here is, like every good pastor or teacher asks a question where the answer is both, and that two negative examples of the culture being downstream of politics is that, decades ago, when the government started funding families that were broken and having children outside of wedlock, and then we're giving tax money to them, well, then what happened? You have more and more broken families. So that, say, in the African American households, 70% of these children are growing up without a father figure because the moms are being paid by the government for having children out of wedlock. And so there's a negative example where the politics, the government, it's changing culture because African American families, from what I understand, they had the same high rate of marriage as Anglos decades ago. Something changed, and what changed was that seminal point. Another example would be where abortion became legalized through the Supreme Court, and then you had so many more abortions, and that has changed culture, so that is something that is a big point in the upcoming presidential elections. A positive viewpoint would be that if we are, say we have in politicians in, say, the state, because one of the discussion points for the presidential elections right now with abortion is to make it states' rights. And so you've got states like Texas and Florida and others with a conservative majority. They have outlawed almost all abortions, at least up to a certain age point. Well, that changes the culture, because now you've said if those people want an abortion, well, they've got to change their behavior, go elsewhere for it, and so forth. So you can change the culture the same way that if you say, hey, we're going to give tax credits, like this isn't in America, but in other nations where they realize that they're not having enough children for replacement. Mm-hmm. And so they're giving tax credits, or they're giving money to families for every child. Well, that's going to change their behaviors. And so that doesn't mean they're going to make them Christian for us, say, outlaw abortion. You're not going to change and make them Christian, but you will change behavior, because culture can be downstream of the government. But then the opposite is also true, because we're so hedonistic, pagan, in so many ways, then that changes the government.
And I would say, when we're talking about culture versus, governments and governance and law and politics, that sort of thing, if we phrase it a little bit differently, that it's a push and a pull between law being letter, like the word and the wording, and culture being just the feeling of the heart. And just for a moment here, this is the idea of modernism versus postmodernism. Modernism says, and rationalism, I suppose, says it's in the words. And so we need to have things phrased and worded in such a way, and then we just have to understand how those words are understood. Postmodern is that the truth isn't in those words or in external reality, but the truth is in my heart. And if we are to be a nation of laws, then those laws they're written in words, and those words have to have a particular meaning. And so there's a push and a pull as to which is going to influence ideas of the land more, either the things that are written in a letter or the feeling of the populace, the feelings of the heart within the people of the populace. And we just talked about this a little, or I guess I talked about it a little bit in Bible class a little bit ago, that we do have some rulings, even Supreme Court rulings, that are predicated more on the feeling of the heart and then trying to find the letter to back it up. And that is not the place of the law, but that is a direct influence of the culture on the law. Saying that the law, one particular justice court, and she portrayed herself as the compassionate Hispanic, which, okay, cool. You can have all the compassion that you want, but your job as a judge is to interpret the letters of the law. And her stated objective was to try to bring a more heartfelt conscience into the understanding of the law, which is a totally different understanding and not the role of the law. That's the role of the culture.
Yeah, and I think if it look at this way too, is the pagan religions of the world, they are getting into bed with the governments of the world. And we can use that phrase, get into bed with, because this is a prostitute. The kings of the earth, these governments, they influence politics, education, art, science, entertainment, etc. And so, if they're funding, say, crummy art, which some governments will, we're going to get crummy art. But a culture can also influence politics, so education, art, science, entertainment, etc., influence the kings of the earth, those government leaders. And so if we have good education, and if we have, say, good art and so forth, good artists, then that influences the government leaders. And it might not be our government leaders now, but if we're raising our children to understand what is good art. I was just listening to a podcast the other day that talked about the artist of the new World War I memorial in Washington, D.C. that's going to be unveiled, I think, in September. And he was pretty passionate about art and what is good art and what is crummy art. There's a lot of crummy art out there right now. And so you push that good art in the same way with education, that if we are educating our children, educating them instead of indoctrinating them in our public schools, that we are using other forms, whether it's homeschooling or a private education or Lutheran education. There's a great ad. I'll share this, not the B article on the Facebook page for Resisting the Dragon's Beast later. It's from New St. Andrews College, and it's a minute and a half just ragging and railing on our weak culture, and it's calling for men who are willing to, it says this at the end, willing to die, absolutely, willing to be persecuted, absolutely, and so forth. It is calling on men. You almost want to get up and do like Braveheart after watching that ad for this high school. And I showed it to my associate Nathan, and he said, they're going to get all kinds of men signing up for that college, because it is Christians fighting against and for our culture to change it.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting, because even as much as things might be shifting in one particular direction, there's always within our culture, there's always outliers. And I saw this one, there was a news clip from Jon Stewart, and I forget who else shared it, but I'm sure somebody else took it, just a snippet from his Daily Show, and then used it in their own promotion. Might have been Louder with Crowd or something like that. Because I like to follow everybody on Facebook and get as full a snapshot as the Facebook algorithm will allow, right? And Jon Stewart was talking about the need for what he called a trad dad, traditional dad. Like, give me a dad who, when the kids talk back to their mom, he stands up and says, no, you listen to your mom. When the kids say, that it's time, I don't want to go to bed, he says, well, yeah, it's time to go to bed because I said so. Give me a dad who answers, I said so, and who speaks with authority. He's like, well, we don't need the whole spank him with a belt and let's do away with just toss him in the lake to teach him how to swim. And everybody laughs about it. But he says, but let's have some guys who maybe we do need a little bit of a trad dad. And so it's like, well, this could be a trending hashtag if we're talking about culture and we're talking about the intersection of culture and law. Here's the main point that I've talked with a couple people about today, even, is that in the large catechism, Martin Luther locates the authority of the government first within the home and within the family. And he says, if you're looking around and the society and the culture around you is just going to hell in a handbasket, to instruct and teach and guide and discipline their children, because that's where you need to start. And maybe that child is going to be facing Hans the hangman because his dad should be there too for not disciplining him better and sooner.
I am very surprised that came from Jon Stewart, as liberal as he is, because that's a conservative idea. That's a Christian idea. And And I'm glad you brought that back, because I had written a note here about the three estates of the government and church and family, the home. And I think we, even in the Christian church, because I've been reading papers, obviously, and books for my previous book about submitting to the government, and then just reading some papers from the seminary for this second book. Yeah, our professors, our pastors, they have said, we just obey the government no matter what. And what that is really, that's a Marxist idea of the government above the church and the home. They may not say that, but they may not come across and say it that clearly, but that's really the essence when you say we're going to submit to the government no matter what. That's Marxist. Christian is, they're all on the same line: church, family, government. And like you said, the government can only function as well as the family functions, and so we need to get back to that part. One last part on this second verse is where it says that those who make their home on the earth have become drunk on the wine of her immorality. Any unfaithfulness to the Lord is like freedom from restraint. Think about those that are calling for freedom, not freedom in our nation. It's freedom for their sinful nature. That's different than what we as Christians talk about. We talk about freedom from our sinful nature. But those who are pagans, those who are unbelievers, it's freedom for their sinful nature. They want to live apart from God. They don't want anyone telling them what to do, not other people, not the government, not even God. And they have set themselves as a law unto themselves. And so it says in verse 14 of Revelation 17 that they are ready to go to war against the Son of God, because they don't like that they are beholden to Christ as their king.
And I think the interesting thing, like in this context, I wouldn't be surprised if the listeners were a little bit shocked that you began our podcast episode talking about the apostate church working together with our government to coerce and to promote paganism and immorality. Because the average American mindset seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be that we are different, that we are exceptional, that this has been our manifest destiny, obvious destiny, and that in history you can see how the government's promoted the apostate church and how the apostate church enforced and encouraged government-sponsored paganism. But the idea that, but we're America, we're different. And I would say if somebody thought that way, because that thought crossed my mind, even when you were going through your introduction, like, but we're different, we're special, I'm a special sunflower, right? That thought crossed my mind also, because we're not different. And exactly what John writes about in this vision has been true across time and across space. And if we think we're different, it's because we just saw it on our money and we bought what they sold us back in the 50s and 60s, that we are the stronghold of freedom and the bastion of the church against all the godless commies. And so we have to say, in God we trust, in one nation under God. And we are so entrenched in the government using Christianity for their own purposes for the last, I'll just say 70 years, because that's our cultural memory. For the last 70 years, that we don't even want to believe that Revelation 17 applies to us. And that's why it's shocking, it's jarring, and it's like, wait a minute, there's a whole lot more here. That isn't just the problems over there, but it's also the problems even among Christians who are Americans.
Yeah, and that's why what we're trying to do in this book is tie in what is going on in our nation to what has gone on throughout church history, all the way back to the Old Testament. When I was sharing this idea of the book last week with another pastor, he goes, that's an interesting concept. and hasn't been, I don't think it's been done yet, at least not in our Lutheran circles. Let's get into verse 3. John writes, the angel carried me in spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed with purple and scarlet and was adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. In her hand was a gold cup full of abominations and the filth of her sexual immorality. So here, like we said before, is the prostitute, Babylon, is trying to appear like the bride of Christ, the woman in Revelation 12, even going out into the wilderness where John is now carried by the angel. So he is taken to a place where it has been untouched by her immoral corruption, her spiritual corruption. Again, this is figurative language. And this is, again, like I said before, recreating an earlier vision of the woman in the wilderness from Revelation 12, verse 6. And the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God in order that she might be fed there for 1,260 days, or it's said elsewhere in Revelation 42 months, which is the entire New Testament period from the ascension of Jesus to the return of Jesus. But again, this woman is not the true church. This is a prostitute, and notice how she adorns herself. The bride of Christ is ugly, but Christ makes her beautiful. Here is a woman that is trying to make herself beautiful by adorning herself with gold and precious stones and pearls.
Yeah, and it, I dare say, in verse 4, she looks successful. It's a very ostentatious, visible display of wealth and apparent success, and in every way trying to present herself as an appealing, hey, this is okay, this is all right, and the woman was sitting on a scarlet beast covered with blasphemous names and 7 heads and 10 horns. That there's this relationship between the woman and the beast. The beast is the one who is covered with blasphemous names. The woman, she's adorned with all these beautiful things, aside from verse 5, that she has the name of Babylon on her forehead. And the way that she lures people along by saying, hey, this is okay, this isn't bad, this isn't a bad thing, you're going to be okay if you follow me, and think of the success. And that idea of deserting the gospel of Christ for the influence and the accolades of the world around us now is yikes.
Yeah, and this woman is rich because this is a rich church. You know, the prostitute has grown affluent through all of her false teachings, her influential relationships with worldly powers, and she holds a cup full of abominations and sexual immorality, because these are 2 tenets of pagan religions. This cup looks clean and beautiful on the outside, this gold cup, but inside contains the abominations of God, everything connected with idolatry. Deuteronomy 29:17 says, you saw their detestable things and their filthy idols of wood and stone and silver and gold that were with them. Yeah. And then if you want to look at the beast, notice the beast is covered with blasphemous names. So again, this beast is the governments of the world, that its sole purpose as a beast serving this prostitute is to break the 1st and 2nd commandments of not having any other gods and then misusing the name of the Lord God. Its sole purpose is to lead people away from Christ. Again, that's what the governments of the world throughout history have been doing when they are not serving as God's servant, when they're serving as Satan's servant. That was the last book. When they're serving as Satan's servant, then we should expect them to do this. And again, that's where you and I are tying in these pagan religions and seeing how this is exactly what the people did of judges with Baal and Asherah. So they get upset when Gideon goes into the house, or goes into his dad's town and destroys the idols to Baal and Asherah, whereas you've got King Ahab, and then especially when he's married to Jezebel, setting up all these high places to Baal and Asherah, and other gods setting up these other high places, even to Molech and so forth. That's the governments that are promoting paganism. And again, that's what we see in our culture.
Yeah, and verse 3, the idea of the horns is, very often a picture of strength. And even that image of 7 heads and 10 horns is an echo of the book of Daniel, where Daniel saw this beast and it had these horns, and so this worldly government is going to be blasphemous and blaspheming, which is to call something not godly that is godly, or call something God that isn't God, while it also is going to be intimidating and fearsome. So whether you follow because of you just bow the knee because of fear, because of intimidation, or whether you are allured by the one who works in concert with this beast, who looks very alluring and looks very welcoming, and looks very successful. Are you gonna follow along with this beast and woman because you're afraid of not following? What will happen if you don't? Or are you going to follow along because of all that is promised you and all that that you think you will have? And it's kind of like a twofold temptation that we ought to pay attention to say that the world around us and these governmental powers and all of these powers, they will look very intimidating and they will flex their muscles. And obviously, generally, in a general way, Jesus wins. Specifically, you as a Christian will win, even if that means that the government has flexed its muscles against you and you are the victim of its powerful horns. The attraction of the woman on the beast is that attraction of success and of conquest, and well, let's all just go along to get along, and that's a different temptation, but it is working together with the same threat of authority and power.
Yeah, and I wonder where conservative Christian pastors would come down on this. And conservative pastors, because I think only conservative pastors would do this, is that I read an article this morning in Not the Bee that was a pastor in Canada that was thrown in jail now for the second time because he was protesting a drag queen story hour at the library. And he's thrown in jail the second time because he had broken his bail. And part of his bail is, leave, don't go and protest anymore. And he went back and did it. And I wonder where Christian pastors would be on that. I wonder if they would say, he's doing something wrong. He's just, he's causing disruption and so forth. And that's where I'm wondering, what I'm going to be thinking of writing in the book is saying, yeah, Gideon went and tore down the prophets, tore down the idols of Baal and Asherah. Now, God told him to do that, but he didn't just go and talk about it nicely in a church setting. He went out and did something about it. And I wonder if we are called upon as pastors to go and do something about it, not hurt anything, not hurt anyone, but going and protesting and saying, this is demonic. This is creepy at the least, but like demonic and the worst of grooming these children to think this kind of abhorrent sexual immorality is normal. Yeah, I think we should, as Christians, be speaking out against this because this is a pagan religion of the worship of Asherah sexuality, and it is the government that is promoting it, at least defending it, by putting this guy in jail. I think that's a real life example today of what we're talking about in this book.
I think that'll be a fantastic example, and frankly, this is why we should read fairy tales. That'll be my book recommendation for today. Get an unabridged, complete version of Grimm's fairy tales. And I'm not sure if the account of the Emperor Has No Clothing is in that one, or if that's in one of the Andrew Lang fairy tale books. But that's the idea that when somebody when somebody is acting in a way that is so far out of the norm, and everybody goes along with it, then everybody will go along with it. At some point, who's going to put the brakes on society? Who's going to reinforce the dam? Or is that we're just going to let this dam burst and let the culture just run rampant? That part of the call of the Christian is to be salt and light in a society. Yes, Jesus is the light. He also calls Christians the light because they have this gospel truth. And but it's kind of a twofold approach. Do we talk against the bad things that are happening out there? Yes. But we also talk in favor of the beautiful things that God wants to build here. It would be somewhat hypocritical of a Christian church to talk against drag queen story hour. I don't like the term drag queen, as if we are condoning this. Let's just say, men dressed as women, whatever. It's one thing to talk against that, but it's another thing entirely to say, this is what a beautiful Christian marriage looks like. Read the book on vocation by Gene Beath, or the other book on vocation by Mike Berg, to say this is the beauty. This is not just stay away from the prostitute on the beast, but return to the image of Christ and his church, his bride.
Yeah. And I think it's salt and light, like you said, but you can't just be salt and light on Sunday morning. And I think that's where, when you hear people saying, well, pastors should not talk about politics. No, I think that politics is really just our sanctification. It is being salt and light in the world. It is applying our Christian doctrine of the third use of the law out into the world. It's not enough to be salt and light in the safe confines of the sanctuary. We need to be salt and light out in the world. And if we are, as pastors, expect our people to be salt and light, we have to be salt and light and going out there. All right. Now you're getting me fired up, Peter.
Doesn't take much sometimes.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's where my associate Nathan was talking about it today too, is like I was running things by him, and he said, all right, so here's me being the mediator, because I'm getting to the age and point in my life is I'll be a little more fiery in the privacy of what I'm saying. And here I can be a little bit more bold. And then if I'm going to be putting something out there, he can make it maybe less bold, just so I don't offend people right away. Just give it a little more time. Verse 5. And on her forehead, so this is a prostitute, this name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of the prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. And I saw that this woman was drunk from the blood of the saints and the blood of Jesus' martyrs. When I saw her, I was greatly amazed. This name of the prostitute is right on her forehead. And what's interesting is this is making it, she's well known, that a prostitute's name was well known in public. And that's what John is saying here. And that her name, though, is Mystery. And I take that as ironic, in that her name really isn't a mystery because everyone knows it. And then her name is Babylon. And that's a significant name because Babylon is, first of all, Babel, the Tower of Babel. And that's the first city of Babylon, where the people were against God. And then later, the nation of Babylon, destroying the city of Jerusalem in 586 BC. And so what God is doing here in saying that here's Babylon, that is the opposite of Jerusalem, the kingdom of God. And just like she is the prostitute, that is the opposite of the bride of Christ. So Jerusalem is pictured as the true church. Babylon is pictured as the opposite, the pagan church.
Yeah, definitely. And that idea, biblically, a mystery is something that God has to reveal, and that he has chosen to reveal this to you and to me, that this woman who is on the beast, it is a mystery, except that he gives us all the details in this chapter to understand. And then at the end of verse 6, John is greatly amazed. She is drunk from the blood of the saints, and he expects to be seeing her punishment. That's what verse 1 had said. I will show you the judgment on the great prostitute who sits on many waters. And John is like, wow, look at her. She is dressed in splendid clothing and jewels and looking very successful. Where's the punishment? Where's the judgment? And he's amazed because that's part of the mystery that God is going to be continuing to reveal in this chapter, exactly what her judgment will look like and what our world looks like now as the judgment is carried out on the woman and on the beast.
Yeah, and then this woman's open liaison with secular brands or secular powers brands her as a prostitute. And again, if you're going to compare that the church is the bride of Christ, then this prostitute is really sleeping with Satan, the father of lies. And then she is the mother of prostitutes. So she is the mother of all pagan religions, everyone associated with idolatry and unbelief. Satan, the prostitute, and their spawn are the exact opposite of the holy Christian church, the household of God. And so I likened it to, so I grew up on Saturday mornings watching the Super Friends, so the Justice League. But it was really good when they got into later seasons. And then you had the Legion of Doom, which was every superhero of the Justice League had its evil counterpart in the Legion of Doom. And John, again, is writing to Christians who are being persecuted by this Babylon, the prostitute, that is riding on the beast out of the sea, which is the Roman government. There, the Roman government was also a theological government in ways because it promoted the worship of their pagan gods, of the Roman gods that they stole from the Greek gods. And they're trying to put down the bride of Christ. And I like this quote from one of the commentaries I read. Not many sights are so revolting and disgusting as that of a drunken whore. Because that's the way he had translated prostitute, was whore, which is a little bit stronger term than just prostitute.
Yeah. And to think that Satan is the father of lies, and this woman on the beast is the mother of the abominations of the earth, and the mother of prostitutes. And so they just work hand in hand, and she is doing the bidding of Satan, who tells his greatest lie that Jesus is not the way. And that is being fulfilled and ensnaring the people of the earth, or promoting and leading them down into further ungodly action. But that shows that is the thing that displays exactly where their heart actually is. That it's not with Christ, it's with this woman and all that she promises.
Yeah, and then she's getting drunk on the blood of the saints and the blood of Jesus martyrs. There, again, thinking of a real life example, think of the Department of Justice, the DOJ in America. Who are they going after right now? Well, they're going after people, mainly Christians, who are outside of abortion clinics protesting them. But they're not going after those who beat up those who are protesting. They're not going after those who have firebombed pregnancy counseling centers, which are often run by Christians and so forth. That is, again, an example of our American government that is in bed with these the pagan god of Molech. And John says that he was amazed by this. And I take that he was amazed and appalled. It doesn't really say from the Greek, but I don't know how you can be amazed at that. Oh, that's so amazing. I take this as I'm amazed, like this is so awful.
Yeah, this is very intense. This is even worse than I thought it would be. And I was expecting, some judgment. And here is this very powerful and very successful image that he sees. Yikes.
And I think we can go through the the next three verses, or next two verses, before we wrap it up, verses 7 and 8. And the angel said to me, "Why are you amazed? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, the one that has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that you saw, he existed, is no more, and he is about to come out of the abyss and go to destruction. Those who make their home on the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be amazed when they see the beast, because he existed, is no more, and will exist again." So here the angel is explaining the beast and Babylon and this mystery of the two of them together. That whole terminology of that he existed, is no more, and will exist again. What that's talking about is from Revelation 4:8, describing God as the one who was and is to come. It's talking about his eternity, and it's a mystery. And here, again, the beast is trying to appear like Christ, the Lamb of God, as he is someone he existed, is no more, and will exist again.
Definitely. And I think, there might be a little bit also, this is a little bit of a toss-up perhaps, that later in history, from John's perspective, later in history, this sort of worldwide power and influence might come up again, where since the fall of the Roman Empire, we haven't particularly had a government that exerted the same sort of at least thought of worldwide control as the Roman government did, and that sort of influence. And maybe he is leaving open the idea that government forces in some way will ally themselves or work together to exert their power in a way that was similar to the Roman government. Just that it will exist again, not talking about like a rebirth of the Roman Empire as such, but a reiteration or a republication of that sort of government exerting its power on the people for the purpose of persecution.
Yeah, and I think of, that the beast can disappear for a while. So it's not necessarily demonstrating itself as a servant of Satan, that it will appear like God created it to be and appear as a servant of God. And there I think of the Roman government when it was ruled by Constantine and Christianity became a legal religion. Well, now the government was not opposing Christianity, it was supporting it. When America came into being in 1776 and the first couple of centuries up until recently, I would say that we had a government that was promoting Christianity, or at least for the last while was neutral toward Christianity. Now you see it has become much more against Christianity, and you see that in, say, India or China or the Soviet Union and now Russia, that have governments that opposed Christianity. But for a while, they allowed it, and then that's where I think where the government or the beast kind of disappears for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But it also says here that the beast is going to have a large and admiring following. So unbelievers, those whose names are not written in the book of life, will give their lives and ultimately their souls in worshiping the beast. That's because they do not want the free salvation that Christ offers. Instead, they are attracted to what? They're attracted to the free stuff the beast, the government, will give them. The government will give them the freedom to indulge their sinful desires according to the pagan religions of Babylon.
Yeah. Yeah, and you pull it all together, and what is it that she promises? Maybe promising success, promising you can do what you want, promising anything that is blasphemy, really. Where if God says you shall or you shall not, the woman says follow your heart, or let me tell you what is actually God saying here, and that truth or that sort of speech has been seen, yes, historically throughout the Roman Catholic Church. It is also there in the apostate church at large, not just the Roman Catholic Church, although that is probably the most prominent example. But at the same time, we just there was another pride event, parade of some sort, and the newspaper. We still have a newspaper in Toledo. The newspaper printed a list of all the local so-called Christian churches who supported this parade and were wanted to be sure that their name was printed as being in favor of it. Is that not the apostate church saying that I want the success that this woman has to offer? I want the accolades and the approval of the kings of the earth, and so I will compromise on my integrity and my morals in order to get what I want from the kings of the earth. And their power, their influence is very alluring, and I don't want to be out of step with that. And I think there you begin to see that the image of the woman on the beast, yes, Roman Catholic Church, but that is echoed throughout, even down to our modern, the present day, even as the Roman Catholic Church is still in existence. In a similar way that the Bible talks about like a big A Antichrist, like the Antichrist, even so many Antichrists are coming. Those who put themselves in the place of Christ, who claim to speak for Christ, but actually are not. They're speaking with the language of the dragon. They are speaking in the native tongue of their father, the father of lies.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up here. Is what I've written as a last paragraph on these last two verses is the enmity the beast has for its enemies will never die out. This is amazing in a terrifying sense. Yet our terror can be calmed by knowing that the beast will go to destruction. That's verse 8. The victorious Christ will allow his faithful saints to escape the persecution by the beast with their end, which will be the beginning of their glory. Or the beast's end by being thrown into the abyss of hell. Either way, God's saints are truly going to be amazed by the awesomeness of our Savior. All right, so we will wrap it up right there. And then, Lord willing, we will see you all next week as we continue to get into Revelation 17. I think next week we'll probably finish it up. And then we get into the hard work of studying each of these ancient pagan religions and then applying it to our current culture. We'll see you all next week.